Not counting ceremonial or courtesy appointments, nor terms shortened by death or illness, nor temps who did not want to stay there, the shortest tenure of any senator in U.S. history appears to have been that of Pierre Salinger, appointed to succeed the late California Senator Claire Engel, who took office August 4th, 1964, was not reelected, resigned December 31st, 1964, 150 days. In our fourth story in the countdown tonight, that gives Illinois Senator Roland Burris 118 days to beat that record. Since he may have perjured himself to the state committee addressing the impeachment of the man who appointed him, former Governor Rod Blagojevich, it's a distinct possibility. Today, while attempting to conduct his listening tour of Illinois, the new senator tried again to insist that there's nothing the matter.
There was no change of any of our testimony. We followed up as we promised the impeachment committee. So the information that's being reported in terms of that this was done because there was a Fed statement is absolutely, positively not true.
But the main problem is what Senator Burris considers not a change in testimony, because in his quietly filed affidavit of February 4th, he acknowledges for the first time having had 3 conversations with Robert Blagojevich, who then headed the Friends of Blagojevich campaign fund. The other problem, that February 4th affidavit arrived more than a month after the January 8th impeachment hearing, which it supposedly serves to augment. And most importantly, from the political standpoint, the "oh, by the way" was filed well after Mr. Burris became senator on January 15th, and even 7 days after Governor Blagojevich was removed from office. And the comparison to the January 8th impeachment hearing makes things a little dicier. The question he got was, did you talk to any members of the governor's staff or anyone closely related to the governor, including family members or any lobbyists connected with him, including, let me throw out some names, John Harris, Rob Blagojevich, Doug Schofield, Bob Greenleaf, Lon Monk, John Wyma. Did you talk to anyone who was associated with the governor about your desire to seek the appointment prior to the governor's arrest? Answer, after consulting briefly with his lawyer, I talked to some friends about my desire to be appointed. Yes. And since that seemed sufficiently vague, it was immediately followed by this.
Because the point is, I was trying to ask, did you speak to anybody who was on the governor's staff prior to the governor's arrest, or any of those individuals, or anybody who was closely related to the governor?
I recall having a meeting with Lon Monk about my partner and I trying to get continued business, and I did bring it up. It must have been in September or July, maybe it was in July of 08, that, if you're close to the governor, let him know that I'm certainly interested in the seat.
That's Lon Monk and not Rob Blagojevich. But Senator Burris says he was just filling in the blanks, that his lawyer had said there would be additional information. Therefore, the apparent inconsistencies are, in fact, the fault of, wait for it, the media.
No, the inconsistencies are coming from you all. The inconsistencies are coming from the press. There are no inconsistencies in my first voluntary affidavit. There are no inconsistencies in my testimony before the impeachment committee, and there are no inconsistencies in the second affidavit that I submitted. None whatsoever. Those are factual. That's the truth, and God knows we shouldn't even be here.
Illinois lawmakers, including Republicans and some Democrats, say they should be there, and they're calling for an investigation. We'll call in Bloomberg News political columnist, Washington editor of The Week magazine, Margaret Carlson. Good evening, Margaret.
Good evening.
Long-term or short-term, he's a goner, isn't he?
If there's any justice, he's a goner. The idea that the brother of Rob Blagojevich isn't a close associate of the governor's doesn't fall into the category of the people that he was being asked about is absurd. It just won't pass any test at all. Here's a guy who was obviously trying to stay one step ahead of the sheriff because he knew that this was coming out. So he says, oh, let me clear up here, give you some information about other affidavits before it came out in a way that was on a tape, for instance. But you would think he would have, known that so much was on tape that he'd better come clean initially. He didn't. He's gone. How he gets gone, I don't know, but he'll be gone.
The first problem, obviously, is you don't need to get into the weeds of this, whether or not that's perjury or just an omission, to realize that extraordinary affidavit inconsistency between that and what he said under oath, because he was asked specifically about Robert Blagojevich, who, unless there's another Robert Blagojevich somewhere, would happen to be the brother of the former governor, who he now says, oh yeah, I talked to him about this.
He thought Rob was Rod and Rod was Rob. So he got confused.
The non-identical.
You know, the problem now is, you know how the Illinois state clock ticks very slowly, because they could have avoided all this, the legislature, by either impeaching quickly, calling for a special election, taking away the governor's power to appoint, but instead they let it ride. And there's Rod Blagojevich. Remember the Feliz Navidad press conference where, you know, he outwits all of them. And then we had the circus of this guy coming here to Washington and, you know, looking like he, you know, it was a Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie appearance. There was such a clot of people and a circus surrounding it. And then, you know, they had to let him be seated because there was no legal way to keep him from being seated. Now there's possibly fraud. I think the way that it might happen is that, you know, Patrick Fitzgerald to the rescue again. He'll be indicted. If he's indicted, then he will be expelled. Otherwise, it's got to go through the Senate Ethics Committee, which works even slower than the Illinois State Legislature. And
how are the national Democrats going to follow this up? What are they going to do in terms of this? Because there were already questions about whether or not Burris could survive a primary battle in 2010, let alone the actual election next year. Are they advised to just go after him as if he were the Republicanist of Republicans?
You know, who's happier, Republicans or Democrats? Republicans are happy because they get to say, oh, here's another corrupt politician out of Illinois. The Democrats were facing a weak candidate in Burris in 2010. This weakens him so much that he'll never survive a primary if he lasts that long. But getting him out of the way earlier would probably be better. Whether that's going to happen is really up to either Fitzgerald or the Senate Ethics Committee. But either way, he will be out of our midst very soon.
I have a great idea for the new governor, Governor Quinn. 2 words. Caroline Kennedy. Margaret Carlson of The Week and Bloomberg News.
Yeah, let her emigrate.
There's plenty of time. Thanks, Margaret. Have a good night.
Thanks, Keith. You too.